So last week I posted a video about hierarchy, and it was a little controversial, generated some good conversation, so I wanted to keep exploring this idea. I think it's really interesting. As I said before, I have an issue with social hierarchy. It's a very particular type of hierarchy. It's not any kind of hierarchy. I have no issue with what you might call a natural power hierarchy, which might emerge when you have somebody who's a brain surgeon and somebody who's the nurse working with the brain surgeon. There's going to be a natural power dynamic between them, or an entrepreneur that employs people. Of course, there's going to be a natural hierarchy in that respect. I'm not a fool. There's another type of hierarchy, which is you could call socioeconomic hierarchy, which is the brain surgeon is going to have more income than the nurse who works with the brain surgeon. That's going to mean the brain surgeon can buy more, can have nicer things, can probably influence society a little bit more if there's a political structure. Of course, there's going to have a socioeconomic hierarchy. That's totally fine. I'm talking about a different type of hierarchy. I'm talking about what you could call some kind of internalized hierarchy, and it has to do with perception of others and self-perception. So, in society, there are certain cultural values that you're kind of born into an environment in which there are cultural values around you. In the West, there is these cultural values about being able to produce a bunch of wealth and buy a bunch of big things, and that's supposed to make you some kind of a better person. It's supposed to bring you up the social hierarchy rank. And especially desirous in this social values system is getting titles. Oh man, if you can be called a doctor, or if you can be called a senator, ooh, wow, you're higher up the social pecking order. I'm claiming that when people rank themselves and others based on these social values, based on this social hierarchy that's external to them, that is incredibly toxic. I have a big issue with it, yet it is nearly universal in society, and I'm claiming that people love it. They love the social hierarchy regardless of where they fall in it. They might not consciously love it, but I think subconsciously they absolutely act in accordance with it and love it. So the simplest example of this would be the person that tries to compensate for his own inferiority complex by buying expensive things. I think everybody has experienced interacting with these people. They go out, get the really fancy car, and let you know at every opportunity how expensive their car is or how fancy their watch is, because they're trying to say, I am a better type of human than you. I am more successful than you and doing life better than you, because they want to feel better about themselves because they're so deeply insecure as human beings. That's a simple example, but you see it all the time in how, in company politics, let's say, for-profit and non-profits, people posturing themselves, playing these power games, not interested in the mission of the company, just trying to say, oh, I have more power than you, I'm better than you, I'm more influential than you, and therefore I feel better about myself by putting you down or raising myself up. So obviously I have no problem with the idea of an organization or an entrepreneur employing people, and therefore people have to report to the entrepreneur, and there's a kind of power hierarchy, of course. But I have an issue when that entrepreneur, let's say, gets a complex where he now views himself as human being plus and more valuable, intrinsically valuable than the people he employs. I think this is totally ridiculous. So just like I think that the world of ideas from every area, from economics to politics to social theory to mathematics to physics, there are fundamental errors where we shouldn't respect the orthodox opinions in these areas. I think there are fundamental errors in the values of society. I don't think it's the case that wealth makes you a human plus. I don't think it's the case that a title is this thing that automatically gets you de facto respect. At least for me. Other people are impressed by titles. I'm not impressed by titles. I don't think it's the case that this kind of love of bureaucracy and the small-minded deferring to authority because it absolves people of their own responsibility, I don't think that's respectable. I think that's bullshit. And I know some people have claimed that desiring this social hierarchy is something that's kind of inescapable. It's in our biology. We have to have these pecking orders. I don't really think that's true. I know a handful of people, there's not many, but I know a handful of people that, myself included, kind of sit back and laugh and pity those who are stuck in this playing this game that doesn't make them happy, doesn't make them flourish, makes other people around them feel like shit, and yet they feel like they have to keep playing because they don't have any other set of values. So the nurse who's helping the brain surgeon is in some kind of a practical hierarchy. Of course, the nurse can't have the kind of power and decision-making ability that the brain surgeon has. But the nurse, I think, can absolutely be doing life better if they identify those values that they think are superior and true and live in accordance with those values. While the brain surgeon is some asshole that treats everybody like crap, that has trying to compensate for his own inferiority complex, that person, it doesn't matter how fancy their house is in my value system, doesn't matter how much political influence they have, they're doing it wrong. And of course, you see this in academia all the time. People always focused on the pecking order, the ranking system. Which universities are ranked the best? And if you're talking out of line, or good heavens, if you're outside of academia, you're not allowed to talk. You're talking out of your social hierarchy. It's this weird class system thing that you see with academics. Again, I think that's because they're compensating for an inferiority complex about their own intelligence. I think you have lots of academics who have this weird value system where they feel like their value as an individual is identical to how they are perceived as being intelligent. If they are not perceived as being intelligent, then they feel like they're not a valuable individual, and that leads to all this kind of, Jason Brennan-like behavior where they actively go out and try to put people down and put themselves up. I distinctly remember a conversation I had with some PhD student about a year ago. And he was saying, almost verbatim, Steve, you are such a crank. You're never going to make it. Why don't you go become a plumber? You can never make it in the world of ideas. He said, someday you're going to be bagging my groceries. Now, of course, he meant this as some kind of an insult. But what happens is these people reveal far more about themselves than they intend. What he meant to say is, I have a profound inferiority complex. And someday you're going to be lower down on the social hierarchy than I am, so I feel better about myself. And I think these ideas are really pitiful because that person demonstrates they're stuck in the social hierarchy. They don't know how to feel good about themselves, and so they just kind of import the value system that they see out there in the external world, and they say, well, I got to play by that so that I feel better about myself. So here's an alternative value system that I wonder what your guys' thoughts are on this. I call it the who gives a shit mentality. And it goes like this. Naturally, in any kind of group of people, you're going to have differences. You're going to have differences of power, differences of potential, differences of impact, differences of income, spending styles, lifestyle choices. You're going to have all kinds of differences that will naturally give you some kind of striation in whatever metric you're judging people in society. However, none of that really matters for your own worth as an individual. What matters is that you are trying to best accomplish the goals that you've laid out and that you are living in accordance with the values that you have identified as being more true to yourself. I think a lot of people deep down, really deep down, do resonate with this. They want that kind of, there's almost an egalitarian flavor to this where it's like, I don't really care about the external. I don't care what you look like. I don't actually necessarily care just what you accomplish. Because what's also important is your potential to accomplish. What's important is your value system. If you've always your whole life wanted to be the garbage man and you get to accomplish that goal, man, I think that is an excellent accomplishment. I think this also leads to a genuine kind of self-confidence. I think there's this perfectly inverse relationship between the amount of pettiness and hierarchy trying to put other people down and the amount of confidence that you have. Right? If you're actually confident and you feel good about what you've been able to accomplish in life, there's no need or desire to participate in this social hierarchy nonsense. So if you guys like that idea, or you don't like that idea, or you think this is utopian or whatever, leave a comment, let's talk about it.